And, you know, as we get older, you know, I hear more and more people talking about functioning, you know, as a function of aging, the aches and the pains and all that. And I'm not really down with that. You know, I mean, if I'm going to be a band leader on into, you know, my old age, I can't really buy into that idea. You know, I've gotten into radio here. And that's really because of Mike Starling, you know, coming from DC and NPR, and they were always very supportive, you know, of me and my work, and they seemed to have a link to Baltimore that was exciting and made us feel connected. And then, you know, Mike Starling lands here and sort of presents the possibility of, you know, if some of us sort of step up, we can create an exchange here. We can help people feel seen and heard. And you know, there's still a lot, there's so much to do, but there is a sort of urbanity in some of the folks that have moved here, to use your word, you know, coming here and realizing there's so much culture here. There's such a rich, incredible sense of place, sense of history here. What went on in Harriet's mind? What went on in Gloria Richardson's mind? How could she be so fearless? How could I be that fearless? It's a spirit that I grew up with in Baltimore that's translated easily to a place like this, where you realize culture thrives on engagement, you know, as opposed to putting it into a museum or leaving it for somebody else. Like, oh, you can't afford to go to the symphony? Well, it's not for you. It's like, how can we take it to the next step where you are the symphony? You know, when you think of Marin Alsop started taking her MacArthur grant and starting orchids, so that the symphony players are going into not the elite schools, but the really tough schools, and engaging kids and getting them to play. You know, it's like, okay, if that can happen in Baltimore, why can't that happen here? Of course it can happen here. You know, I was walking that way the other day. One of my neighbors came out of her house, asked me to say a prayer for her husband because he wasn't feeling well. And I said, okay, well, why don't we dedicate a song to him for next week? Well, he loves George Jones. Okay. Go on my merry way. 2 days later, I get a text. Her husband died. And a few hours later, she died. And that was the morning, you know, the morning of Halloween, you know, the night before Halloween, which leads into All Saints' Day and then All Souls' Day. And you start concerning yourselves with the time of year and with the history of things that of religions and cultures that honor the time of year for why. What is it about November? It's not just about Thanksgiving, it's also about honoring the dead and praying for the dead and accessing the dead. That became my theme for this week. You know, because of course they weren't the only ones that died this week that I heard about, you know, and you reach out to people and just say, hey, in that case, I wanted to know if anybody else knew her and loved her as much as I did. And the other question was, does anybody know a good version of I'll Fly Away? And, you know, I got such an incredible response. You start to think, wow, you know, the whole idea of the funeral needed to be reinvented anyway. It's like we're memorializing, we're honoring, we're acknowledging, and we're staying in touch with the ancestors, you know.
From WHCP in Cambridge, Maryland, this is WomenWattage. We visit with creative women, hear their stories, and drop the needle on the music that mattered.